Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into, well, the really fascinating world of qualitative research methods.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, we're looking at how researchers try to understand what really makes people tick, going beyond just the numbers.
Right, getting into the actual human experience.
Exactly. Okay, so let's unpack this. We're using some insights today from Unstructured Interviews, the sociological toolkit.
A good source for this topic.
Yeah, and our mission, really, is to explore these unstructured interviews. What are their variations? What are they really good at?
And importantly, what are their downsides, their limitations?
Precisely. It's about giving you, our listener, a kind of shortcut to understanding this really powerful way of gathering knowledge. So to start, maybe we should clarify, what exactly is an unstructured interview? Because, we hear interview, and I think most people picture a job interview, maybe, or a news reporter.
Sure, those are common examples. But in research, especially this kind of qualitative work, it's a bit different.
How so? The source mentions it's a one-to-one conversation, but the key seems to be without a fixed set of questions.
That's the absolute core of it. Instead of a rigid script, like a survey, the researcher usually just has a general topic, maybe a few broad themes to guide the conversation.
Okay.
But it's not just a random chat, it's still guided. The aim is to get a really deep, rich understanding of someone's experiences, their feelings, and importantly, the meanings they attach to things in their life.
Meanings they attach.
Yes. And this ties directly into the interpretivist perspective in sociology, the idea that to really understand why people do things, you have to understand their subjective world, how they see things from the inside.
Right, getting inside their head, so to speak, not just watching what they do.
Exactly. It's about their perspective.
Okay, that makes sense. So if a survey can get you facts, what's the unique payoff here? What knowledge does this unstructured approach give us that other methods miss? The source mentions high validity.
Yeah, high validity. And what that means here isn't just accuracy in a narrow sense. It's more about authenticity, truthfulness to the person's actual experience.
Authenticity.
Okay.
Think about it. If you have a strict set of questions, you might force someone's complex experience into boxes that don't quite fit. An unstructured interview, because it's flexible, can uncover nuances, details, maybe even contradictions that a questionnaire would just gloss over.
So it allows for surprises, things the researcher didn't even think to ask about.
Precisely. That's often where the richest insights come from. It lets you discover the unexpected. You might be researching, say, job satisfaction, and find out it's not about the pay, but about a specific relationship with one colleague, something you'd never have put on a survey.
I see. And that adaptability, the flexibility the source talks about, is key to that.
Absolutely. The researcher can follow interesting tangents, ask for clarification if something's unclear, probe deeper on a point the participant raises.
Yeah.
It flows naturally.
And that leads to the other big point, rapport and trust. Does that informal style help people open up more? Definitely. Think about your own conversations. When do you share the most? Probably when you feel comfortable, when you trust the person you're talking to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When you don't feel judged.
Exactly. This less formal, more conversational style helps build that rapport. When participants feel genuinely heard and understood, they're much more likely to be open and honest, even about sensitive stuff.
That's where you get the really deep understanding then.
That's where it gets really interesting, yes. You're creating a space for their genuine story to emerge, not just collecting predefined answers.
Okay, so it sounds incredibly powerful for getting that deep, authentic perspective. But like any tool, it must have downsides. What are the trade-offs? The source flags low reliability and low generalizability.
Right, and those are significant. Let's take low reliability first. Because each interview is unique, different questions asked in response to what the participant says, a different dynamic between the two people. It's basically impossible to replicate exactly.
So another researcher couldn't just repeat the study and expect the same results.
Not in the same way you could with, say, a lab experiment or a standardized survey. They might explore the same topic, but the conversation itself, the specific data generated, would be different. It doesn't mean one is wrong and one right, just different.
Okay. And what about low generalizability? Is that related?
Very much so. Because these interviews are so intensive, they take a lot of time to conduct, even more time to transcribe and analyze all that rich text. You usually can't do them with huge numbers of people.
So small sample sizes.
Typically, yes. Very small compared to quantitative studies. And that means while you get incredible depth on those few individuals, it's statistically very difficult, often impossible, to say, okay, what these 5 people told me applies to the entire population.
So you sacrifice breadth for depth.
That's the fundamental trade-off.
Yeah.
You get this amazing, nuanced understanding of individual cases, but you can't easily generalize those findings statistically. It's a different kind of knowledge goal.
And beyond those sort of theoretical limitations, there are practical issues too, right? Time and cost are mentioned.
Oh, hugely. Conducting the interview itself takes time, but then you might have hours of audio recording. Transcribing that word for word can take, 5, 6, 7 times as long as the recording itself.
Wow.
And then you have potentially hundreds of pages of text that you need to meticulously read, code, and analyze to find patterns and themes. It's incredibly labor-intensive.
Definitely not a quick process.
Not at all. And that brings us to something really subtle, the interview effect.
The interview effect, what's that?
This is the idea that the interviewer isn't just a neutral collector of information. Their very presence, their characteristics, maybe their age, gender, ethnicity, even how they speak, can subtly influence what the participant says.
So who is asking the questions can change the answers.
It can. People might respond differently, perhaps consciously or unconsciously, depending on who they perceive the interviewer to be. They might want to impress them, or maybe feel more comfortable disclosing certain things, or less comfortable disclosing others.
That's a really interesting complication. It challenges that idea of objective data, doesn't it?
It really does. It forces us to acknowledge that in this kind of research, the data isn't just found, it's sort of co-created in that interaction between interviewer and interviewee.
So interpreting the findings means thinking about that interaction too.
Absolutely. Good qualitative researchers are very reflective about their own positionality, how they might have shaped the conversation. It's part of understanding the context of the data.
Okay. Now, related to this, but slightly different, is the idea of a group interview or a focus group. How does that fit in?
It's a variation, really. Instead of one-on-one, you have a small group, maybe 6 to 10 people, discussing a topic together, guided by a researcher who acts more like a moderator.
And what's the advantage of doing it in a group?
The big plus is the interaction between participants. People react to each other's ideas, they bounce thoughts around, maybe challenge each other, build on what someone else says.
Ah, so you see the dynamic.
Exactly. You can get a wider range of opinions, see how ideas are negotiated within a group, maybe uncover shared norms or points of disagreement that wouldn't surface in individual interviews. It's great for exploring, say, reactions to a new product or a public health campaign.
But I can imagine downsides too, like what if one person dominates the whole conversation?
That's a classic risk. You might get 1 or 2 loud voices taking over, and quieter people don't get a chance to speak, or maybe feel intimidated.
Or people might not want to say what they really think if it seems unpopular with the group.
Precisely. That's called social desirability bias, or sometimes groupthink. People might conform to the perceived group consensus rather than expressing a dissenting view. So the group dynamic can be a source of rich data, but also a potential source of distortion.
So again, it's about choosing the right tool for the job, understanding what you might gain versus what you might lose.
Absolutely. It really highlights that there's no single best method. It always depends on your research question. What are you trying to understand? Deep individual experience. Go one-on-one. Group dynamics and shared ideas. Maybe a focus group is better.
Okay, so wrapping this up then, we've journeyed through unstructured interviews to find them as these flexible, guided conversations.
Explored their strengths in getting that authentic, deep, valid understanding of someone's world.
Acknowledged the limitations, tricky to replicate, hard to generalize, time-consuming, and that subtle interview effect.
Right. And touched on focus groups, with their own unique mix of interactive benefits and potential pitfalls.
It really feels like the core message is about valuing that subjective experience.
I think so.
Yeah.
This deep dive reminds us that understanding people isn't always about counting things or running controlled experiments. Sometimes the most profound insights come from just listening, allowing people to tell their story in their own way, with all its complexity.
So for you, our listener, maybe the takeaway is this. When you come across studies or reports about people's attitudes, beliefs, experiences, especially on complex social issues, think about how that information was gathered.
Yeah, was it a survey? Was it this kind of deep conversational interview? What might each method reveal and what might it hide?
What kinds of questions can really only be answered by letting someone speak freely? And what understanding do we potentially miss if we don't use methods like these? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.